Hello, nieces and nephews. It's Auntie Hasina, and I'm here to talk about one of my favorite guys, Martin Luther King. I actually named Gianni by his middle name, so it's Gianni Martin. Why? Because I was growing up and I just thought he was the best thing since sliced bread. We are going to read this book and hopefully you'll have thoughts and feelings of how you can be a great impact in this world when you get of a certain age. And remember, you could be 6 and be the greatest. You don't have to wait until you are 16, 30, 50. Start now. Every part matters. A picture book of Martin Luther King Jr. by David A. Adler, illustrated by Robert Casilla. Martin Luther King Jr. was one of America's great leaders. He was a powerful speaker and he spoke out against laws which kept Black people out of many schools and jobs. He led protests and marches demanding fair laws for all people. Martin Luther King was born on January 15, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia. Martin's father was a pastor. His mother had been a teacher. Martin had an older sister, Willie Christine, and a younger brother, Alfred Daniel. Young Martin liked to play baseball, football, and basketball. He liked to ride his bicycle and to sing. He often sang in his father's church. Martin is in the center with his brother Alfred to the left and his sister Willie Christine to the right. Young Martin played in his backyard with his friends. One day he was told that 2 of his friends would no longer play with him because they were white and he was Black. Martin cried. He didn't understand why the color of his skin should matter to anyone. Martin's mother told him that many years ago, Black people were brought in chains to America and sold as slaves. She told him that long before Martin was born, the slaves had been set free. However, there were still some people who did not treat Black people fairly. Now being that I am a Martin Luther King lover and historian, we talk about civil rights, we talk about slavery, nieces and nephews, but guess what? Even before slavery, we were here. We are the first. We started civilization. So we were kings and queens before slavery. We're the ones that made science and math and literature. English would have not been our first language. They had white-only playgrounds. Could you imagine? In Atlanta, where Martin lived, and elsewhere in the United States, there were white-only signs. Black people were not allowed in some parks, pools, hotels, restaurants, and even schools. Blacks were kept out of many jobs. Even the word black and white never made sense to me as a child. I remember the first time I even knew that color, or let's not even say color, the pigments in your skin had anything that was significant. I was in Chicopee, Massachusetts, visiting my aunt and uncle. and I went to the playground in their backyard per se. And I'm on the merry-go-round, playing, having fun with everyone. And this girl that did not look like me, her skin was very much lighter than my color brown. She asked me, "Why are you the color of chocolate milk?" And that still stands to me. It does something for me when I hear that, because I did not want my son to ever have to deal with something like that. Sad to say, it happened to him too. Frederick Douglass, George Washington Carver, Harriet Tubman. Martin learned to read at home before he was old enough to start school. All through his childhood, he read books about Black leaders. Martin was a good student. He finished high school 2 years early and was 15 when he entered Morehouse College in Atlanta. At college, Martin decided to become a minister. Jeez, he finished high school, guys, at 15 years old. Gianni will be 13 this year. And Shalila, I know you are actually the oldest, so you'll be 14 this year. Are you ready to finish high school? This was a smart man. After Martin was graduated from Morehouse, he studied for a doctorate at Boston University. While he was there, he met Coretta Scott. She was studying music. They fell in love and was married. In 1954, Martin Luther King Jr. began his first job as a pastor in Montgomery, Alabama. The next year, Rosa Parks, a black woman, was arrested in Montgomery. She had been sitting just behind the white-only section on the bus when all the seats in that section were taken. The driver told her to get up so a white man could have her seat, and Rosa Parks refused. Oh, look at this. Could you ever see this happening right now? She was in her section at the time, but because the bus was full with people that were lighter complexions, and they like to call them or label them as white, she had to move. I'm so happy we're not in that era anymore and we're moving forward. And you guys are coming up after us, and you will make it even better. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led a protest. Blacks throughout the city refused to ride the buses. Dr. King said, "There comes a time when people get tired of being kicked about." So they boycotted. I never read this book before, so I'm going to tell you. They boycotted for almost a year. I think over a year. Just so they could have the same rights to ride the bus. People would walk to their jobs and school. They would find a way to get in the same car together and carpool. That, I can only imagine, was a challenge for most, but they made it happen. One night, while Dr. King was at a meeting, someone threw a bomb into his house. Wow. Can you imagine that again? I can't. Martin's followers were angry. They wanted to fight. Martin told them to go home peacefully. "We must love our white brothers," he said. "We must meet hate with love." This is why I always admired Martin Luther King, for his thought of always combating hate with love. I know it can be challenging to do if somebody takes from you or puts their hand on you, but once that situation is past, don't hold that hate in your heart. When you hold that hate in your heart, you'll be older before your time and it'll show on your face. You do not want that. You want to stay looking young forever. The bus protest lasted almost a year. When it ended, there were no more white-only sections on the buses. I told you. I knew it was about a year. Dr. King decided to move back to Atlanta in 1960. By this time, Poppy was already born, and Grandma Ruby was in my grandmother's belly because she was born in 1961. There, she continued to lead, I'm sorry, not she. He continued to lead peaceful protests against white-only waiting rooms, lunch counters, and restrooms. He led many marches for freedom. We demand decent housing now. It was this thing called redlining back then. And from what I hear, they still do this practice where people of color would only be able to live in one area. Or let's say people of African descent were only able to live in one area. Even voting. They're changing that as we speak. Last year they passed a law where if you're out there and you need to drink something, nobody can give you a bottle of water, or you can't travel to certain voting precincts with a group of people. Can you believe this? We march for jobs for a decent pay now. I'm thankful that things are changing, but we have much more to do. In 1963, Dr. King led the biggest march of all, the March on Washington. More than 200,000 black and white people followed them. I have a dream, he said in his speech. I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Some that are listening might be young and not understand, and some might be older. The content of your character is everything you have. So show it in the best way you can. The first thing people see is what you look like. Hygiene, making sure your hair is neat, dressing in a way where they know that you are astute, because you already are. I know all my nieces and nephews are special and smart. I don't know anybody that came out of the clan with my mom and my dad that are not. So I know you are. The next year, in 1964, Dr. King was awarded one of the greatest honors any person can win, the Nobel Peace Prize. The country was changing. New laws were passed. Blacks could go to the same schools as whites. They could go to the same stores, restaurants, and hotels. White-only signs were against the law. Dr. King told his followers to protest peacefully, but there were some riots and some violence. Now, these riots weren't just when people of African descent were doing the right thing of not fighting. Sometimes they would do the right thing and still get spit on by the police. They would let their hoses out. They'll let their dogs out. And some people know how it feels to get water splashed on them, maybe by a super soaker or a water gun. But think about a fire hydrant and a fireman's hose. That type of pressure is nothing I ever felt, and I would never want to feel. Then, In April 1968, Dr. King went to Memphis, Tennessee. He planned to march so black and white garbage workers could get the same pay for the same work. On April 4th, in Memphis, Dr. King stood outside his motel room. Another man, James Earl Ray, was hiding nearby. He pointed a rifle at Dr. King. He fired the gun, and an hour later, Dr. King was dead. Yep, there he is. Martin Luther King Jr. dreamed of a world free of hate, prejudice, and violence. Carved on the stone in which marks his grave are the words, "I am free at last." Now, things have changed in certain respects. He does have that space in Atlanta, Georgia, where Dr. Martin Luther King lays at peace with his wife, Coretta Scott King, when she passed away. Now they have this big sculpture, huge, enormous sculpture, bigger than if you spread your arms as far as you can go, in Washington, D.C., to memorialize who Martin Luther King was. We now have a African American or persons of African descent museum on the Smithsonian. There have been a lot of changes. Even when I go back and look at his death, and they named James Earl Ray, Coretta Scott King actually went to Congress and wanted them to erase what they put out, that this man, James Earl Ray, killed Martin Luther King Jr. It was actually the FBI that did that. Sad to say, but that is the truth. And you can always look it up when you're ready. You can always go to the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. Or as you guys say, or as Gianni says now, it's not Google it, it's search it up. Go search it up. It's there. I know this was a special bedtime story. We are actually going to be celebrating his life on the 17th of January this year. I think everybody has that peace, and remember to combat hate with love. And if you can't do it to that person, just take that same energy of love that you would have gave to them and give to yourself. Why? Because you deserve it. Again, good night, my nieces and nephews. Sleep tight. Do not let the bed bugs bite. I will see you tomorrow.